the basic units have essentially 4 amperage ranges, so that's very easy. And you also have a wire feed control speed setting. And essentially what happens is you have a spool of wire in here, and that feeds through the mechanism and up through this gun cable and out to the gun. And when you pull the trigger, it starts feeding that wire. And when that wire contacts the metal, it creates the spark and causes the heating to happen and the welding action. So once you get everything set up, you can and you can look at like a reference table to say, okay, I'm welding 1/8 inch metal. Let's set it to high and set the wire feed to 7, let's say. Then all you have to do is point the gun at the metal, keep it about like a 1/2 inch away, and just pull the trigger and go. And it's I like to tell people it's almost as easy as using a hot glue gun. If you can use a hot glue gun, you can use a Mig welder. So that's a great way to get into welding. Arc welding is nasty, messy, and it's really only well suited for really heavy stuff. And it takes a lot more skill and is a lot easier to mess up. Mig welding also, you can do weird positions, like you can do vertical really easy. You can stick the gun in at any angle, and you don't even really have to look at it, because it basically just does all the work for you. And another option would be, there are now pretty cheap inverter TIG welders, but TIG is a little bit more tricky in some aspects. It's a lot slower, and it takes generally a longer time to master. And I'd say the smaller units are much better suited for like really thin projects, if you're doing like really thin sheet metal for like hobby work or stuff like that. So the chop saw and the Mig welder are definitely my recommendations for starting out. And another thing that's most important when you're welding is having a really good welding mask. This one here is a Miller Pro Elite auto darkening solar panel, solar powered welding mask. And you have all different adjustments on the inside. You can select how dark you want the shade to be. So you can either do arc welding or Mig welding or TIG welding. And you can adjust the sensitivity, you can adjust the delay, everything you need. And it's nice and light. Also, when you're buying an auto darkening mask, what you want to do is look at the time it takes for the shade to darken. You want one that will darken as fast as possible, and generally you want one that's light, because when you're wearing this and it's kind of putting its weight in front of your face, your neck will tilt forward a little bit. I mean, not a lot. You don't really notice it unless you're wearing it for like 5 or 6 hours a day. So those are some things you want to look at when you're looking for an auto darkening mask. If you don't get an auto darkening mask, you basically either have to have one of the constant shade ones that flip up, and they're just massive pain. This one you can actually see through. It's basically like wearing a pair of sunglasses until you actually start welding. Then it gets real dark and you can only see the weld area. So these are the 2 pieces of main equipment. For actually welding up the project, I'll be using the TIG welder, because I don't have this one set up right now, obviously. Now, as far as metal for your projects, I'd highly recommend square steel tubing, or rectangular steel tubing. It's extremely strong, extremely rigid, and if you try to make something out of angle iron, if you have a long piece of angle iron and you have your hands at both ends, you can actually flex it pretty easily, even if it's a fairly thick piece. So to get the same rigidity as a piece of square steel tubing, you'd have to have a really massive thick piece. So you can use thinner tubing that weighs less, that costs less, and still have it be incredibly strong, much, much stronger than the angle iron. And also, it just fits together and forms so beautifully. Like say you need to make whatever part, you just chop it up on the chop saw at whatever angle you need, and basically just lines up with whatever other parts you need, and you weld it up. Super strong, lightweight, and extremely easy to get good results, and really nice, long-lasting, high-quality pieces. This table we're actually filming on is a 4x8 table made with the 2-inch square steel tubing, and you can literally put a truck on this and it will not flex. It's important to triangulate things, because when you triangulate things it adds a lot of strength and rigidity. Now, most small MIG welders can handle up to 1/8-inch capacity, which might not sound like a lot, but when you're dealing with square steel tubing, 1/8 inch goes a long way, because this 2-inch piece of 1/8 inch wall thickness is, I mean, it's really, really heavy duty. You'd be hard pressed to need anything thicker than that anytime in the foreseeable future. Maybe if you get into like repairing heavy machinery and stuff like that, you would need something better, but generally when you get to that point you'll be buying more well-suited equipment for what you need. So some of the useful tools for welding is obviously angle bracket welding clamps. Basically just stick it on a piece you weld together and stick your other piece on, and you get a nice 90-degree angle in a few seconds. And you can put your other pieces on and weld those in place, and generally do whatever you want. Also another useful thing are these clamps here, and you basically just squeeze the trigger to clamp them down. And they're very useful for jigging things up yourself when you don't have anyone around to help you, because you can just kind of put things together without having to struggle too much. So those are some useful things, and let's get into the actual project for tonight, which is going to be the table for this. And it's not, the one I'm going to build is just going to be basically on the floor to add rigidity to the frame, and it's basically going to have a beam going out with a support or a stop piece that you can bolt down to it, or with like a little quick clamp type of setup. And that will allow me to cut the metal much more quickly and much more accurately with high repeatability, because like say this is the stop piece, and you have a saw here, and say you can adjust this to whatever length you need. Say I need 10 4-foot long pieces. I slide this down to 4 foot long. I set my vise up and I feed the tubing in, and just slide it in until it stops, cut it, slide another one in until it stops, cut it, and they'll all be really high tolerance. If you just try to mark it by hand, it's not as accurate. So this setup that we're going to be building tonight will be really useful for all the projects that we're going to be doing on the later episodes. And it will increase your quality, it will increase your speed, and the more accurately you can cut things, the more quickly they will weld. And that translates into a massive amount of time saving. Because if you have to, with TIG welding especially, if you have to weld, say this piece didn't line up so nicely, if it was like a kind of a nasty gap, trying to bridge that gap and fill it would take a massive amount of time compared to just running a seam down the side. So I'll go grab a measuring tape and we'll figure out what's needed for this little table contraption.